Alright, training with Saero. This will be exciting. I chose to train with Saero. He seemed to be very skilled, so I trusted him to train me to the best of his ability. I didn't want to be a silent observer in this war. I would pull my weight. Saero brought me to the Grand Hall, which he had apparently claimed as his personal training grounds, as Sergeant had to use the official grounds for the army. Personal training grounds?
When I train my lady, I bring her here. That way she is not seen by the army.
Why would her being seen by the army be an issue?
It's not a matter of it being an issue. We simply choose to train together alone.
I nodded. If Diana had her reasons, then that was enough for me. Saero nodded in return before holding his hand out to the side.
Now, do you have a preferred weapon of choice? Choose wisely. You need to focus and master one weapon if you wish to benefit from this training. I won't allow you to change your mind later.
Oh. I stared at Saero, unsure of why he would ask me that. However, I closed my eyes and thought to myself for a moment. There were a couple of weapons I could think of. I thought of a gun, but what if human guns were powerless here? After all, demons had magic on their side. If they were powerful enough, maybe even a speeding bullet could be blocked with ease. Oh, I was gonna say, but James uses guns, but we wouldn't know that if we're on Matthew's route. Oh dear. I thought of what melee weapon I could use. I already know Taekwondo, a sword, surprise me, a spear. Sure. Surprise me, what do you think? Saero stared in surprise. What? I was ambitious enough to try anything. Why not? He probably knew more about weapons than I did anyway. Saero then gave me a small smirk before allowing black and purple mist to envelop his hand. I found myself growing nervous. What if he gave me a small dagger or something really hard to learn? I began to regret electing for a surprise. Oh, what is that? Is that like a bracelet dagger thingy? Eventually, the mist materialized into a strange object. A large lavender triangular blade sticking out from what looked like a round gauntlet. As Saero walked towards me, he formed a copy of the weapon in his other hand and handed both to me. The openings of each gauntlet facing toward me. I raised an eyebrow at him. Was he really expecting me to stick my hand in those?
What, afraid to try something new now?
Grumble, grumble. I shook my head. I had asked for this and was confident enough to try them. I slid my hands into the gauntlets and felt my fingers brush against the inner handles, allowing me to grip the weapons in each hand with ease. I lifted the weapons from Saero's grip and observed them. They seemed very light, almost feather-like, but I could feel energy pulsating from them. What are these?
Gauntlet daggers.
Nice.
The human world has a similar version of these weapons called katars, if I'm not mistaken.
Right. They seem pretty light.
They may be light, but they can be incredibly deadly if used properly. Imagine them as extensions of your arms.
Gulp. Would I be able to learn how to use these properly enough to defend myself? I wasn't sure. Saero walked away from me before forming his spear and gripping it tightly, ready to begin our session.
Trust your instincts. I'll go slow so you can adjust yourself to the weapon. However, I won't remain slow for long.
Oh boy. I stared at Saero, now fully settling into what I had signed up for. I was learning how to defend myself and possibly how to kill someone else. I felt a nervous shiver run up my spine before taking a breath and trying to relax my muscles. Saero seemed to take my breath as my signal to prepare as he took a step back and readied himself with a stance.
Are you ready?
I nodded. I had asked to be trained. If I wasn't ready then, I wouldn't ever be. Saero crouched down, gripping his spear before lunging for me, ready to skewer me on its blade. Oh boy, not this again. Dodge! I reflexively jumped away, avoiding the tip of his blade as I stepped to the side. I stared wide-eyed at how far he had thrust his spear, jamming it all the way through the space I was previously in. Was one of those options scream, by the way? That's too funny. My brain just suddenly, I was in a panic. I'm like, it's a timed choice. Oh, crap. There's a spear. Was he really trying to kill me? Oh boy. Parry! Come on, now we know he does the thrusting thing. Parry it. I couldn't help but smirk as I stepped forward and practically backhanded his spear with the gauntlet of my guitar, making it bounce away from my body and leaving his own body open for attack. I felt powerful as I ready to attack him. I lunged in and prepared to pierce him with my own attack. However, Saero moved his spear to cross his body, blocking my attack and pushing me back. I growled at myself for not seeing the strength of his defense. As I landed, though, I saw a small smirk on Saero's face. Was he proud of me, or was he mocking me? Either way, I used the momentum to lunge forward again, continuing our sparring match. Okay, apparently that worked out okay. We continued to train relentlessly through the day. Each break we had was small, but I understood why. I only had a week to learn how to fight, after all. Time wasn't on our side when it came to me learning how to fight, or at least defend myself. As we finished the sparring session and slowed to take another break, I let out a sigh. I was exhausted, but I knew I had to keep going. If the Incubi were going to keep training, then I had to keep up as well. Saero let out a small sigh and stretched, wiping some sweat from the side of his brow before looking to me.
Let's take a break for now.
Yeah, good idea. I collapsed onto the floor on my rear and slouched over my crossed legs, thankful to no longer be on my feet. Angel is just obsessed with her rear this route. I thought Taekwondo was hard, but fighting with a weapon was proving itself to be even harder. I felt a little envious for people who were able to master weaponry.
I have to admit, I'm impressed. For the first time holding a weapon, you did pretty well. My lady had to train for months to try and use her weapon properly.
Well, what does Diana use? I was curious about her. I knew she had magic, but did she really need a weapon? Of course, if her energy ran out, then she would need some sort of protection. Saero stared wide-eyed at me for a second before smiling softly.
She uses a saber, a curved sword. While regular straight swords are good for piercing your opponent, curved blades are made for slashing and cutting your opponent down. They're a little difficult to maneuver without in-depth training.
Saero looked down at his hand, forming a saber with a black grip and a deep purple blade. It looked like a masterwork blade, despite it forming out of his magic. As Saero stared at it, his smile brightened a bit.
A saber is much more graceful in combat than a regular sword. Anyone can wield it, but it takes a true master of the blade to use a saber properly and make a fight look like an elegant dance.
He's got it bad for her. I was in awe. I could see a soft shadow of adoration in his eyes as he spoke. Did he really adore his mistress that much? Yeah. You seem to really care for Diana. Not that I snooped on you or anything earlier. Saero looked to me with a chuckle.
I don't just care for my lady.
Ooh, he's gonna come right out and say it. That was obvious. The way he spoke about her spoke volumes of his affections for her. As Saero looked to me, a flash of realization washed over his eyes. What?
You're human, so you would understand.
Oh, right. He's like, you understand about the love stuff. You're not like a demon who's just like, love, blah. There's no such thing. It's a fairy tale, blah. Understand what?
Love.
I stared at him, knowing the meaning of the word, but not understanding what he meant by saying it. What about love? What about love?
Well...
For a moment, Saero looked back to the saber in his hand before shaking his head.
Never mind. It's nothing.
Come on, man. Open up. I wanted to ask more, but a pair of footsteps echoed through the room from the door, causing me to turn around and see who it was. Diana, lightly glistening with a thin layer of sweat and wiping her brow, stepped into the room with a smile. I could hear Saero's breath hitch softly as Diana walked in. She did a small hair toss, most likely to get some cool air behind her neck, before looking to her guard and my trainer.
How is training going?
Going fine, my lady. How are the airs?
It's so cute how nervous he is, oh my goodness.
They're strong, but not strong enough. At least, not yet. It will take more time to get them up to par with where they need to be for the war. They've been in the human world for too long, and they've lost their sense of real battle.
In haste, Diana looked to me and held up her hand towards me as if to ask for forgiveness.
No offense to you, of course.
My goodness. Your mood swings. They throw me for such loops. Offense taken. It's alright. I understood. The human world was vastly different from the demon world, so the boys had become humanized and softened. Still, I was sure that they would train hard and become better than the Demon Lord.
Anyway, I was just taking a break and wanted to check in. Had to make sure you didn't kill our guest, Saero.
I would never!
Diana's laughter filled the room as Saero's face brightened to a hot pink tinge.
I'm merely joking. I trust you, Saero. Besides, she can take care of herself.
Diana looked to me with a nod and a smile as if she knew that I would be okay, at least in Saero's hands.
I'll leave you both be then. I'm sure that after we're finished training, your husband will want to replenish his energy, and it wouldn't do if you were still training here when he finishes.
Oh boy. Just come right out and say it, don't you? With that, Diana turned and walked out of the room. Saero and I kept our eyes on her before I looked over to the suddenly love-struck guard. His eyes were glued to the door that Diana left from, almost unblinking. Saero? That's fine. Let him have his thoughts. There's no harm in letting him be weird for a little while. You know, that weird love sickness. As he stared at the door, I stretched my neck. Finally, Saero snapped out of it and looked at me, blushing and wide-eyed.
Sorry. Where were we?
I don't know, man. Training?
Training! Right. Let's go again.
Yes! That's what we're here for. Okay. In a complete reversal, Saero's expression hardened to a serious stare at me. I nodded, knowing that the break we had was now over. Once more, we trained and continued until dinner rolled around. As the soft echo of dinner-time bells reverberated through the halls of the castle, Saero and I went our separate ways. Him to his lady, me to my man. Bedroom. Exhausted and tired, I marched to my room and opened the door, surprised to see Matthew already there. Huh? Matthew? Oh no, he's got the collar now. What the heck? Okay, well that was unexpected. However, what was odd about him being in the room was not that he was there before me, but that he was staring at the fire, eyes glazed over in almost a pale blue tint. Something was going on. I walked over and placed my hand on Matthew's shoulder, slowly walking around him to look directly into his eyes. It was almost creepy to see, but he seemed almost dead. Matthew. I gently shook his body, trying to snap him out of whatever trance he was under, but gasped as I spotted a blue ring around his neck. As I did, the air around me became colder and a little darker. What was going on? Panicked, I looked around, trying to pin down what was causing this. Matthew's voice brought me back to him, hearing his voice drawl out of his mouth like an emotionless doll. I gripped Matthew's shoulders tightly and shook him again. Matthew! Still nothing. Don't smack him! Kiss him! It's the best way. Kiss of life. I had to break him out of whatever spell was consuming his mind, and there was no way in hell I was going to smack him. Instead, I took his head into my hands and pulled him into a kiss, locking lips with him and shutting my eyes. I didn't understand what made me do this. It was me. But I was determined to make it work. I waited. And waited. Until finally Matthew wrapped his arms around me and leaned into the kiss, letting me know he possibly broke through. I opened my eyes slightly to see his eyes closed, but his arms around my waist were secure and loving, just like how I remembered. Were you talking to a dragon as well? As I slowly pulled away, Matthew opened his eyes and revealed their lovely ocean blue color. Perfect. However, his cheeks were a lovely contrast of red.
Hi.
I guess you don't remember that happening. I smiled a bit, giggling. Hey, what happened? Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm fine. I was just looking at the fire. It's pretty warm.
Oh boy. This is gonna make it harder. Every part of me didn't believe him. Then again, something was wrong, and maybe Matthew was becoming a victim of it. I frowned and cupped his cheek, making him lean into it slightly. Are you sure? You looked like you were possessed. Matthew furrowed his eyebrows, unsure of what I meant. Did he really not remember? I now became concerned, despite desperate to know answers. Why was he acting so strangely? Matthew took my hands in his and held them gently, rubbing his thumbs over the tops of my hands.
Hey, is everything all right?
almost glared. That was what I had asked him. I wasn't crazy. I knew that something was off, and I had to try to figure out what. I squeezed Matthew's hands instead. Where's Simon to back me up when I need him? Matthew, I'm serious. You were staring at the fire, and your eyes just looked glazed and stuff. Pressing his lips together, he looked down, trying to discern what I meant, as if he didn't know what I had suggested he did. I pulled his hands, now worried. I didn't want him to assume I was making things up. You believe me, right? Matthew stared into my eyes, reading them as he nodded.
I do. I do. I don't know how to respond. I mean, I don't remember being in a trance.
As he said that, however, he suddenly curled over and held his head, hissing in pain. Matthew? Quickly, Matthew collapsed onto his knees and gripped his head, digging his fingers into his hair as I followed him down. Now I knew for sure. Something was definitely wrong. I cupped Matthew's face, trying to read his expression and trying to figure out what was wrong just from sight. A moment passed before Matthew let out a gasp of a breath, opening his eyes wide and panting for some fresh air to enter his lungs. His eyes painted his fear, as if he had just encountered a nightmare within the moment that passed. Matthew, what happened? Matthew wouldn't speak, furrowing his eyebrows and shaking his head.
I heard someone calling to me.
At least you're hearing it now. Calling to you? For a moment I believed it to be his mother. Maybe he was hearing what I heard in the human world, but why didn't I hear it anymore? It made no sense. Matthew shook his head and gritted his teeth.
It sounded like my mother. But how could she...
I took Matthew's hands and held them to my chest, catching his attention. Hey, let's go ask the others about this. It's not too late to go talk to them. Matthew suddenly shook his head and took his hands from mine, grasping my shoulders.
It's all right, really. I don't need their help. We can figure this out on our own.
Matthew. I had a really bad feeling about the situation. Matthew was getting put in trances, then getting headaches, and hearing his mother's voice. Why was he so reluctant to get the help of his brothers? It's gonna end badly if we just do it ourselves, isn't it? Not that I don't trust you, but we're both having episodes. We need outside help. This was too mysterious and dangerous. We needed the help. Matthew, we need to...
Please, just trust me, okay?
I trust you. But this is out of our hands, man. Matthew stared deep into my eyes, pleading silently for me to trust him. I bit my lip, still not completely sure that this was the right choice. As I slowly let out a whine of complaint, Matthew gripped harder on my shoulders. Not enough to hurt me, but enough to emphasize his point.
Please.
Matthew seemed adamant. I swallowed my nerves and nodded, slowly taking in a breath and letting out a sigh. Matthew leaned forward and kissed my forehead, thankful that I was willing to trust him. However, trust wasn't the issue. I trusted Matthew very much. What I didn't trust was whatever was trying to influence him and hurt him. I didn't just want to leave this in the dark, and I didn't want us to hit a wall with this that could potentially hurt Matthew more, or make him do something even more odd. I grimaced before standing up, helping Matthew up. Come on, let's head to bed. Matthew nodded, agreeing that right now sleep was something we probably needed. I led Matthew to bed and helped him in, cuddling up to him and laying my head on his shoulder. Matthew?
Yeah?
Are you sure you'll be okay?
I'm sure. I promise. I'll figure this out in no time.
I nodded once more before closing my eyes. I had to let him try. If all else failed, I could go to the others for help, but not unless it became dangerous. Okay, at least we're on the same page, Angel. I'm glad. For once. Still, something felt wrong about this entire situation. First, there was something wrong with me, but now there was something wrong with Matthew? We had the worst luck. I expected the night to take me away into a world of slumber, but was quietly awoken by Simon poking my side with his knife. Hey man, did you see that? What? I looked down at my side to see Simon waving his arms and pointing at the door, revealing it to be partially open with a familiar red eye peeking through it. I stared, suddenly wide-eyed, but Diana didn't move from her spot, knowing I spotted her. What the heck? Thank you, Simon? Did she want me to go over there? Simon pulled at my hand, wanting me to go, so I snuck out of Matthew's arms and crept to the door, causing Diana to back away from it and give me the space needed to leave the room. Can I help you? Diana?
Is everything all right?
Huh? Where was this coming from? I furrowed my eyebrows. Simon, did you go and report to Diana? What do you mean? Diana pressed her lips together and looked into the room for a moment before looking back to me with a serious expression.
I was doing my usual routine around the castle, and felt somewhat of a disturbance in the air, like something was trying to make contact with someone here. It was a weak wave, but...
Ah. I stared, surprised. Someone was really trying to contact Matthew? I became overjoyed to know that it was simple enough. Diana tilted her head at me, seeing my expression.
What? Did something happen?
Before I opened my mouth to speak, however, Matthew's plea echoed in my head. He wanted me to trust him. If I told Diana, I'd ruin his trust for me. I merely bit my lip, shaking my head. No, I'm just surprised is all. Diana raised an eyebrow at me, but I didn't budge. I didn't want to be the one to say anything until Matthew needed me to. Despite it fighting against every moral code in my body, I had to put some trust in Matthew. Eventually, Diana nodded before turning to leave.
I apologize for disturbing your sleep. Please, have a good night.
She'll be keeping an eye on us now, won't she? With that, Diana left me alone in the hall. I stared, mildly flabbergasted at the fact that she simply let it go. However, would she look into it more? I had to admit, I hoped so. I returned to Matthew's arms that night, hoping that everything would be okay. And you guys made it through another night without sleeping together. That's great. I'm so proud. Things are just getting better and better with this game. The morning was unkind as I woke and yawned, feeling drowsiness still try to consume my mind and force it back to sleep. However, I had to train today, and so did Matthew. Speaking of Matthew... Hey, he hasn't disappeared in the morning either. That's great. I turned my head to see Matthew rubbing his eyes, waking up alongside me. However, his grumble let me know that the night was not kind to him. Ah, someone else is getting the nightmares this time.
Is it morning already?
I nodded and gently leaned down, kissing Matthew's forehead. That seemed to lighten his mood as a happy smile danced across his lips and he let out a happy sigh.
Good morning.
Morning. I smiled as I hovered over Matthew's face, seeing his beautiful blue eyes gaze into my eyes through the blur of sleep. With a sweet, infectious smile, Matthew reached a hand up and cupped my cheek.
You are so pretty. You know that?
And you're still half asleep. I felt a blush creeping up on my face. The way he said it so casually made my heart flutter and had me forgetting about the world around us. It was like we were in our own little universe for a short moment of time. I nuzzled his hand and giggled. I didn't want the day to roll on to us getting ready to separate and train just yet. I wanted to sit back with Matthew and enjoy our time alone. No problems, no danger, just us. Matthew grew a small smirk before snaking his arms around me and pulling me against his chest, making me gasp and grab onto his shoulders, not wanting to crush him with my weight. However, Matthew smiled and squeezed me close.
No nightmare last night, huh?
As he said it, I realized it. There was indeed no nightmare for me last night. I had a peaceful, dreamless night. I suddenly smiled and looked down at Matthew with a happy nod. Yeah, no nightmare. I had a good sleep. Matthew chuckled before leaning up and kissing me softly, just enough for me to feel it. As he pulled away, I became curious about his own night. Yo, did you do like an Eric and go into our dreams to protect us, or James or something? What about you? Matthew's smile faltered a bit as I asked, but shook his head slightly and gained his smile back.
It was rough. I woke up a couple of times, but that was pretty much it.
There was more to the story, but I had to let it go. If he wanted me to trust him, then I had to with the full extent of my heart. I nodded and planted a light feather-like kiss on his nose, making him chuckle beneath his breath. So, what's the plan for you?
Well, I figured I could skip some training and just spend some time with you.
Oh, Matthew. With a playful smirk, I grabbed the nearby pillow and gently bounced it on him, making him flail a bit.
Hey!
You know training is important, Matthew. Matthew smirked and rolled us both over to have him on top of me, bouncing his own pillow on me. Gah!
I can totally train with you in a never-ending pillow fight!
My goodness. Oh, it was on. I quickly grabbed my pillow and swung it at Matthew, landing on target and causing him to roll off of me. With a grin, I arched my body in the opposite direction, hoping to land another hit on him, but Matthew quickly ducked and swung his pillow at me, hitting me with a soft, fluffy impact.
Gotcha!
The battle became intense as soon as we were double-fisting pillows, trying to whack each other with our chosen weapons while also avoiding the fireplace, the bench, and truly anything that looked expensive around the room, which was everything. Regardless, we were immersed in our own world, duking it out with feathers and cloth as we lost track of time. We barely even noticed the door open.
What's going on in...
Oops. As Diana's voice rang through the air, I gasped in surprise and looked over to see the succubus holding 2 plates with stacks of pancakes on them. Whoa! What frightened me and Diana was a sudden knife chucking itself in Diana's direction, causing her to sidestep and letting the knife rake through a stack, effectively nailing the pancakes to the wall beside her. Do you want to tell me about that night you had, Matthew? Whoa!
Hey!
Diana and I looked to Matthew, seeing him panting and posed in mid-throw. His eyes flashed back and forth between gold and blue, glaring hard at Diana, most likely in surprise from her sudden entrance. Well, that's unlike you, Matthew. And once again, I was taken away from my fantasy and brought back to reality. Diana snarled and practically slammed the 2 plates she was holding on the table, glaring daggers at Matthew.
What in the 7 hells was that about?
Diana! As Diana took a step forward, Matthew suddenly shook his head and realized who was approaching him and who he essentially attacked, causing him to step back and place his hands in front of him.
Whoa, hold on!
Well, of course we're going to defend Matthew. I quickly reacted, not wanting Diana and Matthew to start fighting. Besides, Diana took us by surprise. Matthew couldn't have known. So another one of those, like where I saw Eric as like the demon lord. Maybe he saw Diana as somebody else. I rushed over and placed myself between Matthew and Diana, holding my arms out to stop her. Diana, hold on! Diana stopped and glared down at me, now turning her frustration towards me.
What?
I opened my mouth to speak before Matthew rushed around me and pressed his hands together, bowing his head.
I'm sorry. I didn't know it was you. I thought it was an attacker and...
An attacker in my home? They would be dead before they even set foot through the gates!
I looked to Matthew, seeing him grit his teeth and press his hands together hard, trying to gain some form of forgiveness from the succubus who seemed to want his throat cut open. Diana snarled quietly before clapping his hands away and gripping his chin, making him stare up at her. Did I say clapping his hands away? How do you clap someone's hand? Slap his hands away?
Ugh. The next time you dare to attack me will be the last time you feel your heart beating in your chest.
Ow. With a threatening scowl, Diana pushed Matthew back and away from her, causing her to turn away and walk towards the exit of the room. I, however, rushed to Matthew, catching him before he tripped on his own feet.
Eat, then get to training. Don't waste time.
Diana finally left, leaving me and Matthew lost in our own space once again. This time we were awake and aware of what was going on, mildly ashamed of the delusion we placed ourselves in before the sudden surprise from Diana. Matthew rubbed his head, looking to the floor.
Man, I really screwed up.
Aw. Easy to do when tensions are high. I knew that he messed up, but he needed to get himself together and fix his mistake so he could move on and figure out the problems he already had. I wrapped my arms around him, nuzzling his shoulder. It's all right. I rubbed his shoulders as he rested his forehead against mine.
How the heck do I deserve you?
I merely smiled and kissed his cheek. Mwah. Because you love me, and I love you. With a chuckle, Matthew kissed my cheek in kind and nodded.
Right.
Matthew and I turned to our breakfast and ate what we could, with Matthew taking the plate he managed to attack. Aw, thanks. The pancakes almost slipped off the knife that was still embedded in the wall, causing Matthew to run and catch it in his empty plate. He didn't eat it and merely left it there, avoiding it like it had some sort of poison in it. We eventually separated to train, letting the day roll.